What's up? Welcome into today's episode of Pushing the Pile, brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. Make every moment more. We're back, Leger, back from, well, you're back from Mobile. I'm still in Mobile. We're recording this Thursday morning at the Senior Bowl. 2 days of practice in the books. I'll be there a little bit later today. I didn't get to see you down here because you were on the field, Leger, big time in me. How'd you get that accent?
Man, you know a guy that knows a guy that knows a guy. But it was weird because this was the first year where they were like really strict when it comes to the on-field credentials. So like at first I didn't have it. So like at first practice I was upstairs. And the second day, for people that don't know my process, like the first day I like to be on the ground just to hear the players talk, see how they react to coaching, get some, especially with the O-line and D-line. I want to see like what their temperament is. The second day I kind of shift over to like skill position. So I like to be upstairs to be able to see the whole view of that. So like yesterday I was actually with our Ryan Wilson and Emery Hunt, and we were watching from the 50-yard line all the way at the top.
Yeah, I actually had to move positions yesterday because I had sunburn on the left side of my face.
Oh, my God, bro, the sun was serious yesterday.
I wanted to even that out. So I had the sun going right in my face. Forgot my shades, which was on me. But, yeah, I'm with you. I like to get I think the biggest thing I glean from, like, being boots on the ground with these guys, and we'll get to a lot of Senior Bowl talk later in the show, but is – just seeing the body, how they're put together, is the biggest thing. How, like the immediacy of what these guys' builds are. Are they super bow-legged? Are they knock-kneed? Like things that on tape maybe you can't get a good sense of, but in person you really can see, who these guys are. And a lot of times, in scouting, it's cliche to say, but like it's a trade space world. Like the guys that look the part more often than not are the guys that end up being the part. Very, you have your Dominic Punis of the world who have these bad bodies for their respective positions that sometimes make it, but more often than not, those guys they get drafted lower, and because history shows they don't succeed at that higher rate. So we'll get to Senior Bowl in a little bit, but in the first off the ball segment today, Kellen Moore has emerged as the front runner for the Saints head coaching job. But does he want it, Leger? Does anyone want it at this point?
The funny thing is, Mike, I actually did an HQ hit the other day when Mike McCarthy decided to remove his name from the running. Mm-hmm. And I literally said this, like, there's a reason why this job is still available. Now, again, Kellen Moore could be their front runner guy, and obviously he can't take the job because right now he's the offensive coordinator for the Eagles. He's getting ready for the Super Bowl. So they would have to wait till that ended for him to officially take the job. But again, when you look at this scenario and the situation that the New Orleans Saints are in, they're in this situation because they continue to kick the can down the road when it comes to bad contracts, especially with veteran players. They're already in a deficit when it comes to cap money next year. So coming in as a head coach, you already know that, dang, we're over $50 million in debt and over the cap already. So there's some bookkeeping that we have to do. How much maneuvering can I do to actually bring people in? I think people forget. I think they only brought in like 2 people last year. I think Willie Gay was one, and then Cedric, I'm forgetting his last name, from the Miami Dolphins, the receiver. That's a slot receiver, right? The only 2 guys they brought in free agency. So when you look at this team in totality, it's like I don't have much wiggle room. And then the question mark is, the new coach coming in, does he feel comfortable with Derek Carr being the quarterback? Is there going to have to be some bookkeeping when it comes to that? You're not in a prime position to take one of the top 2 quarterbacks in this draft. So it's just like, it's probably the least attractive job, and that's why it's still on the market right now. And until they change their mindset, Mike, in regards to not kicking the can down the road and just taking a lot of that money on those bad contracts and then restarting over in like the 26th season, they're going to continue to be in this trend.
Yeah, to me, this is the least attractive job, not only like this hiring cycle, but since those Texans teams, remember when they hired like David Culley, right?
Yeah, like, Culley, he got the 1 year, and then Lovey got the 1 year.
This is what it feels like. It's just a team that's so behind the 8 ball from a cap perspective, so strapped in that regard. Quarterback position. So, I mean, you have Derek Carr, but like you don't have the guy of the future, and you're not in a position to go secure that guy. Yeah. Now, the Texans got around that by obviously having a terrible season, then getting CJ Stroud. That's what this feels like. So it feels like the guy before the guy. So at the head coaching position. So whoever gets the job, I just would be surprised if they get more than honestly 1 year. It feels like they're going to stink this year. I mean, if they were smart, they would stink this year and be in the
But
Arch
that's the
Manning Sweet
thing.
Six.
They don't want to do that, Mike. Like, you got to look at like Denver, and Denver actually kind of hit gold because Bo Nix was the perfect quarterback for Sean Payton. But essentially, what they did with Russell Wilson's contract, they're like, we're just gonna take on all that dead money and get it off the books. That way, in the future, we don't have to worry about that. But yet, the New Orleans Saints don't want to do that. They keep restructuring,
Yes.
kicking the can down the road, and again, that's why they're in this position. They have to eventually just take on all that bad money and just like clear it after one season. And that way they could start anew and start fresh, because you're doing this continuously every year thinking you're going to go 10-7, 9-8. When that never happens, you usually go 8-9 or 7-10, and you don't make the playoffs. And now you got all this bad money out there on these contracts. And again, you keep kicking the can down the road. So until they decide to just take on that bad money for one season and, like you said, essentially stink, it's going to be pretty bleak for their future.
Well, the problem is, like they really, from a cap perspective, they can't like eat the money right now. They have to do everything they can just to get under this year. So
yeah,
it would almost be, they'd have to eat it next year. So like 2026 is the year that they would have to just like clear the books. And I think they should, but that means that this rebuild, if you're a head coach job taking this, you're 2 years away from even having just like a cap situation where you can start playing in free agency, where you can start signing guys to big deals. So not a good spot to be in. That's why I said probably the worst spot franchise has been in since, well, those Texans team. But, you know, in the NFL, it bounces back quicker than you think sometimes. And I do think Mickey Loomis and that front office, they've been good at identifying talent. As much as they played this cap game a little too much and overplayed their hand post Drew Brees, thought they were better than they were the last few years.
Yeah.
I do think that from a draft perspective, very few teams have been as good as the New Orleans Saints over their tenure of identifying talent. So that's why they keep around this front office regime, because they have been good in that regard.
Yeah, without a doubt. When you talk about some of their drafts, you know, Alvin Kamara, Marshawn Lattimore, couple different offensive linemen.
That one's still
couple offensive linemen, right? They've actually, like you said, identified talent. I think the bookkeeping is what's been the major issue for this team, and maybe they need to bring somebody that has that mindset in that could, you know, maybe help Mickey Loomis. Because, again, like you said, I wonder, Mike, is there a scenario where it just depends on how the contracts are constructed, that they could make some of those contracts like guaranteed and void out the rest of the years? That way they could get it done this year.
There's really, the problem is maybe next year, right? But the problem is this year they have to even play some cap games just to get under that, you know, $55 million over. And they've already kind of hit the back end of so many of their guys like Demario Davis, like Cam Jordan, where they're like right at the back end. So like there's no more wiggle room. Like they're having to eat those this year already. So they're going to have to create wiggle room with other guys. And so I think that could be a possibility in 2026. But as it stands right now, they're just like, they're doing everything they can just to get under, which is, well, not a spot you want to be in when you're as bad as the Saints are already.
At all.
All right.
At all.
All right. That's our first off the ball segment. We're going to take a quick break after that. Going to get to our stock up, stock down from the first 2 days at the Senior Bowl right after this.
I feel home when I see the faces that remember my own. When I'm with my friends, I feel home.
All right, we got to do it. We're going to start in a sour note. We don't have to harp on them, but we got to go through them. The guys who are stock downs, we're going to go to first, and then we're going to end on the positive note. But who you got? Who's your first guy that you've been disappointed with through the first 2 days?
Emory Jones, the right tackle, who's actually played some guard at Senior Bowl too, from LSU. The thing about him going into the season, he was considered probably a top 15, top 20 pick. And he's had some struggles. And a lot of people were surprised. I was actually talking to some scouts and some front office people that he came out. A lot of people thought he would potentially maybe go back and really, you know, work on his craft and become a little bit better and more ready to go into the NFL. But I think he just looked at the landscape of the offensive tackle position and said, well, this is, you know, a class where I could maybe sneak into the back of the first or second, but he really hasn't helped himself. He's really struggled when it comes to speed to power. He's really struggled in at guard at times as well. Now I will say he did look a little bit better in the competition period. I believe it was best out of 3, and he kind of maybe won 2 of those yesterday. But overall, I think he hasn't had the performance that he would have liked coming into the Senior Bowl, where he had a great opportunity to kind of kill the noise when it came to him. I don't think he's killed the noise. I think people are still going to continue to talk about some of his shortcomings when it comes to his pass protection, him being able to anchor in on speed to power as well.
Yeah, I wasn't super high on him coming in, but I obviously recognize the talent that you said when coming into the season. Like, the guy is physically gifted. He is built the way you put together an offensive lineman. And even one of the reps in the team drills where going up against Shamar Stewart, he just doesn't get deep enough on like a normal drop back pass set, just lets him walk around him like to the top of the pocket. It's like elementary day one offensive tackle play stuff to be making those mistakes in the Senior Bowl. It's just like, it's not to say that he'll never figure it out, but when a guy is that big of a project who's played already this much, you can't start him right away. And it's like, when are you going to start him and where are you going to start him? So I think ideally, I think he has the talent and like physical capabilities to play tackle, but just seeing stuff like that, I'm like, he might have to be a guard at the next level. Yeah. And I doubt he's a first or second rounder at this point, even with those physical tools. Just hard to go to bat for him, unfortunately. All right, my first one, stock down, and this kills me because I think this guy is so talented. It's Kentucky defensive tackle Deion Walker. Was the talk of the weigh-ins when he came in at 6'7" and 1/4 inch. By my database, that's the tallest defensive tackle ever measured pre-draft process since the year 2000, since we started like keeping those things for real. But man, he cannot play low, dude. If you've seen this guy play, he is so, for a guy 6'7", 340 pounds, he moves incredibly well. The guy his feet are so good. And you see a guy who's so athletically gifted at that size. It's like, wow, he has to be good, right? And coming into this year, a lot of people has him as a top 10 player in the class because he had like over 50 pressures as a sophomore at Kentucky. Correct. And on tape, he played way too many snaps for a guy that size. He was worn down in so many games, and that was part of the problem. But you shouldn't be worn down in these. And if you're not putting your best foot forward and not able to, dominate FCS guards and the competition he's been going up against, because it's not a great interior offensive line class here at the Senior Bowl, I'm worried. And especially in the run game, he just cannot play low enough. He cannot hold up to double teams. At that size, you're thinking like, 340, that's a nose tackle. No, I would not want this guy at nose tackle whatsoever in my NFL defense, because he will not hold the point against doubles, maybe one-on-one, but I did not see the consistent ability to sink and drive at that size. And it's like, well, what is he then? Can he drop down and play edge? Because that's a body type that, 6'7" guys, more often than not, that's where they end up. They're like, taller guys can play the edge, and it's not as big a deal because, again, you don't see double teams. You're more one-on-one. You're playing more in space. You can get that first touch advantage. But that's like, he's like 70 pounds away from even trying that. So I don't know what to do with him, but I do know that the first couple of days of practice, he did not impress whatsoever.
I thought he had a better day yesterday. I thought he flashed in some team periods. And to your point, I don't think, even though he's built at 6'7", 340, he's not built like a traditional 3-4 nose tackle. That's the thing. He's an athletic guy. Like, he can get up the field. So honestly, I would put him in the 4-3 at nose. I wouldn't put him in the 3-4 at nose. Because that was what, I think he's on the American side, if I'm not mistaken, maybe on the national side. But that's the scheme that they've been running, and he's actually had some success in team periods, getting on the edges of nose tackles. Like, it's hard to block him one-on-one. You talked about his size being an issue. I saw a playing team yesterday where he actually came out with, he had his knees bended, and he actually had good pad level. And we call it the double bag drill, right? And they do this in the combine where you hump one bag, then you hump the other one. You saw him flip his hips. You see the athletic ability, and he got back off it. And I was like, okay, that's what I'm talking about. I think the biggest thing with him too, Mike, is a mindset. Like, when he goes, he's almost impossible to block. But there's not enough consistency of it. And I think that's one thing that scouts are worried about. Like, what's his why? What's his temperament? Because he should dominate play in and play out. You talked about it being 6'7", 340 pounds. You talked about his pass rush ability for somebody that size. He's a freak athletic defensive tackle. Cam Jackson also has brightened my eyes as well. I actually had the pleasure of calling him a couple of his games when he was at Memphis before he transferred to Florida. So I knew what skill set he had. He's one of those big dancing bears as well. And he's actually looked a little bit better than Walker throughout the Senior Bowl as well. Similar builds and everything. But going back to Walker, I just think for a lot of scouts and front office people, it's going to be his temperament and his mindset. Like, why can't we get this guy to go every single play?
Yeah. And only 20 years old, though. I mean, guy's super young.
Very young, yeah.
So there's potential there. Tell me what you think about this, because I see that body type. I see his ability to move. Why doesn't this guy play offensive tackle? I mean, like, I know it's crazy like to think about, but like
definitely crazy to think about.
He is tailor-made. I mean, that is a build that the high-end offensive tackles in the NFL, that's what they look like. I mean, that is a guy who is built to play offensive tackle. I know back in the day, Eric Armstead was a guy that people wanted to play offensive tackle back at Oregon when he was coming out as a recruit. Just because when you are those big, tall defensive ends, it takes a special dude to be able to hold up on the interior. And we've seen Eric Armstead even throughout his career probably do work on both the outside and the inside. Yeah. So I don't know. I'm curious if
that'd be wishful
thinking,
work out. Man, I wonder if he played it in high school at all.
Yeah,
you're right. Body type wise, but like I said, I think this dude is just he's a different breed. He kind of fits into that DeForest Buckner, Eric Armstead guys that are 6'7" plus, but are freakishly athletic, right? Because he can bend and get on the edge for a guy that big. I'm talking about in the interior as well.
Yes.
So again, I don't think you traditionally, he wouldn't be good on the Baltimore Ravens, right? As a Travis Jones guy or Michael Pierce guy, but you go to a 4-3 and you let him wear out that center one-on-one. I think that's where his future looks like. And again, to me, it's all about temperament and mindset for him.
All right, who's your next one?
My next guy for stock down, and this is a tough one because I was a big fan of this guy going into the season, Jalen Milroe from Alabama. And again, we knew there would be some struggles for all these quarterbacks. We saw so many balls on the ground with quarterbacks in exchange because none of these guys have taken snaps under center, right? Yeah. All these guys are in the shotgun. And we saw that with Jalen Milroe. Just some of his footwork just has not improved. And I was hoping in the short time since Bama, didn't get to the college football playoffs that maybe he would have been working with a coach. He just seemed like his footwork was all over the place at times, right? And then the biggest thing for him, we know he can throw a pretty deep ball. It's the singles and the doubles, right? The intermediate short passes. The accuracy still isn't there. And I remember a play vividly. I think Oben, defensive end from Notre Dame, wins on the edge, right? But as a quarterback, you still finish the play, right? And he ends up throwing a short crosser right to Kaiser. So it's like Notre Dame on Notre Dame crime versus Jalen Milroe on that play. And it gets picked off by Kaiser and goes the other way for 6. So some of the things that I thought I would, hopefully see him improve in, I haven't really seen. And supposedly there's been chatter that he's going to work with Jordan Palmer after this, which would be good for him for sure. But again, it's like, where do you draft him? Because I think Louis Riddick said it perfectly. Like, he's a project. Do not draft him if you expect him to play right away, because it's going to be a failed experiment. This is a guy that you're going to have to realize it's going to take some time with him. But he has a specific skill set that can be explosive with his ability not only to run the football, but to throw it down the field, right? It's all about the singles and doubles, because that's how you win in the NFL, the singles and doubles, right? The home run passes are great, but to consistently win and drive the ball down the field, you got to have the singles and doubles, and that's where he really struggles.
Yeah, and I think the biggest thing with me is I don't know if that improves because his hands are tiny. I mean, I think a lot of the issues, and I see it, the reason I was so wary of him just on his tape is that his ball placement on screens, should be layups, right? He should be putting those in receivers on the helmet every time or like in a good spot. His ball placement on screens is just haphazard. And I think it's because of that ball handling. When you have 8 3/4 inch hands, and we did this with Kenny Pickett, right? It's difficult to spin it correctly every time. It's just difficult to handle an NFL football. It truly is. And so I worry that with that going against him, I don't know if it ever gets fixed, right? I think it might just be a product of that and those accuracy issues and the ball fluttering and whatnot. I don't know if he ever turns into, because I think the comparison right now is Jalen Hurts, and Jim Nagy talked about, he said Milroe's, further along in his development than Hurts even was coming out. but Hurts was like a physical specimen with large hands, and always accuracy was never the case with Hurts. Like, we didn't question that. It was just arm talent, ability within structure.
Correct.
Milroe,
the processing part.
Yes. So Milroe has the arm talent. There's no question about that. But I'd almost rather, for a quarterback who's that big of a run threat, I'd almost rather just be accurate, right? I don't necessarily need to have God-tier arm talent to be effective at the NFL level. I just want him to hit the layups. And unfortunately, too many missed layups on his tape and throughout the week. All right, let's stop harping on guys. Let's start going stock up. Who has impressed you? Who's your most stock up? Who's impressed you the most out of any guy this week?
Well, the guy that's no longer there, or supposedly not going to be there anymore, Mike Green, the defensive end from Marshall. And I talked to you about this before. I had the privilege to not only sit down and talk with Mike Green during the regular season in college football, but call one of his games. I think the biggest question for him, people were concerned about his weight. And I tried to tell people, like, because his weight came in at like 235, I think, for the springtime. And I'm like, we don't know if he was sick that week. Plus, it was early in the springtime. And again, I've talked to him and his coach, Coach Charles Huff, who's a really good mentor and also a really great leader of men. And he talked about how Mike really locked into the weight room this offseason. Like, he took that mindset that he had on the football field and locked it into the weight room. And he weighed in at 251. And I was telling everybody the whole week, I was like, I called this dude's game. And he was eye level with me, and he looked stocky. Like, I was like, bare minimum, he's 245, right? 231, 235 that people saw from the spring, I was like, that's definitely not accurate, right? And then sometimes you worry about guys potentially gaining that weight, which again, I don't think he gained any weight. I think that's the weight he played at throughout.
Yes, this season. His body looked. He was not carrying bad weight.
Correct. Yeah. So you worry about him being a little bit slower, and that didn't happen. Matter of fact, people wondered if he had the strength. We saw the speed and power on Josh Cornley, and it was ugly. Like, it was the rush of the week so far for defensive lineman at the Senior Bowl. He literally went straight over him and got to the quarterback on one-on-ones, and just the effort that Mike Green plays with. It's rare to see a guy that have that much success, who led the FBS with 17 sacks and led the FBS in TFLs, to consistently play as hard as he does. I think I literally, after watching yesterday's practice, I was like, I would not be surprised if his agent decided it's time to leave, get ready for the combine. And then sure enough, it looks like that's what's going to happen because I think he solidified himself as a first-round pick this week in Mobile. Yeah,
I love Mike Green's tape. It's very difficult not to. Guy's very explosive. He's very flexible. They had him and Donovan Ezaraku, the BC edge, unfortunately doing the hoop drill against each other, which I thought was unfair to both of them because I think they had the two best. Like, they were the two best at it, and they had them going against each other. I'm like, come on, let's get them against one of these like stiffer edges so we can really compare and see what like elite Ben looks like, because those guys both have it. To me, the bigger issue isn't necessarily the weight, but like his frame. He is tightly compact for an edge guy. He had the smallest wingspan of any defensive lineman down in Mobile, only 6'5". Like, that is the issue with him, is just the first touch. But if you're going to build a guy who can get around being a tight frame defensive end, it would look like Mike Green, a guy who is capable of bending the edge, explosive off the line, just basically not getting touched in the first place is his best weapon in that sort of first contact advantage. So, yeah, Mike Green, that was a statement performance from him. I 100% agree with you. That guy solidified himself as a first rounder, could very well be like a top 15 pick after this, depending on how his combine goes. All right, my guy. And this, to me, guy through 2 days has one of the best offensive line performances I can remember at Senior Bowl. Gray Zabel, the North Dakota State. Well, he was a left tackle there, but he's played left guard, center, right guard. He's going to be on the interior in the NFL. I can't remember a guy playing all three of those as well as he has at Senior Bowl. It looks like with each position he goes to, it looks like that was the position he played, like his footwork, his hand usage. I'm just like, who is this guy? How does he, how is he this advanced at all of these positions and this capable? Because usually offensive linemen, if you played one, you tend to look like a fish out of water, especially when you flip sides. Like the footwork going from left tackle to right guard is just a complete inverse. And my God, he's been fantastic. Really not a lot of negatives to talk about. This guy looks like could very well be a first rounder at this point.
And that's the thing. Like, I was talking to a few people, and there's some buzz for late first round. The last guy that did that to the level that he's doing it and I think he's actually done it at a better level than this guy, and this guy's played really well in the NFL, is a guy that went to the same school as him, and Cody Mott. People forgot that he came in as a tackle, and Mott was one of the first few people at the Senior Bowl to play all 5 positions. Right now, it'd be interesting to see if they actually put Douzable back at tackle just to finish the gambit, play him at left and right tackle so he could just finish the gambit, and he'd be like, yeah, Cody, I did the same thing. And Cody went in the second round, top of the second round, right, because of what he did at the Senior Bowl in Mobile. They're talking about Douzable maybe going in the back of the first round because he's been that dominant out here. And you talked about it, right? The upside for him, just like Graham Barton, the guy that played left tackle, that played a little bit of center at Duke, but he moved into center at Tampa Bay and he's really solidified that offensive line. Douzable can do that for your team, right? Or it looks like it so far throughout these first couple of days at Mobile. So I think the upside, because he played left tackle at North Dakota State, and now he's playing in the interior, like people don't know what his upside is, and that's always going to be intriguing for NFL teams.
Yeah, and the sharp teams at the back end of the first round know that guard is now like a very valuable position. Like everyone wants offensive linemen. So it would very much surprise me if, someone like the Ravens or someone like the Bills or, just one of those well-run franchises that are drafting at the back end of the first round, one of them's going to nab this guy because I do think at this point, very, very safe pick on the interior offensive line. All right, who's your next one?
This guy, coming into the season, a lot of people thought that he could potentially have been the first or second receiver taken in this draft class. A lot of people were worried about his measurables, not only his height, his weight being an issue. Tez Johnson from Oregon. But Mike, you can't jam what you can't touch, right? And that's been the perfect explanation for what Tez Johnson has done down here in Mobile. Like nobody has been able to get his hands on him, even though he's undersized. If I'm not mistaken. I think he weighed in at 150?
156.
Yeah. So like
when did you hit 156, Leger? What grade were you in?
Oh my God. Maybe 7th grade, 6th or 7th grade. So like that was a big concern. I know a lot of people give the Tank Dell comparisons, and actually I think a guy like Tank Dell helps him out because of the production he's had in the NFL, right? Again, you're always concerned about a guy with a slighter frame, but he's the perfect slot receiver, and he has been dismantling guys in the slot. I don't think anybody stopped him yet, whether it's team period, one-on-ones. He has found a way to get open. So everything that I saw this summer before this season, I saw it again with my eyes on the tape out there in Mobile, watching it in person. So his stock has to be up. And again, if he was, say he was 2 inches taller or he was 20 pounds heavier, I honestly don't think he'd be in Mobile today. He'd probably leave because he's been that dominant, right? But because of his frame, people are talking maybe back in the first, second round, and that's why he's probably still there.
Yeah, so he's 5'9", 156. Yeah. But what I look at for wide receivers is not so much the height. It obviously does matter for high pointing and whatnot, but for the slot, it's not as impactful. What I look at is wingspan. He has a 6'1" wingspan, which is actually bigger than the guy I always go back to with this. Chris Olave had just under a 6'1" wingspan. He went top 15, right? Yeah. So wingspan is more impactful. 5'9" guys who have short wingspans, if you're a sub 6 foot wingspan, that's pretty much a death knell in the NFL. There are not guys getting it done. So if you're at 6'1", you can work with that. I mean, that's not a guy that's going to have issues hauling in off target passes and things of that nature. So the Tank Dell comparisons, it's the best one because there's so few, right? I don't think he's Tutu Atwell. That's the only other guy like in that mold.
And even he went to the top of the second.
Yeah. So guys have had success in that. With Tank, you saw him much more do the full range of wide receiver play. He played on the outside. He played physical on the outside. You saw that on his tape more than you saw Tez at Oregon just be basically a slot wide receiver.
Correct.
But in that mold or like in that role, gosh, he's, just automatic. A guy who maybe is not a full-time starter for you, but on the third down, put him in the slot against press coverage. It's like, I think he's getting open, man. I just do. It's because that's all he's done this week. So he's definitely made himself some money. I'll go to this wide receiver class though, because he's not the only one. I think a lot of these corners have gotten their ass kicked. I haven't been impressed by too many of those guys. Unfortunately, it's not set up for corners, but usually some cream rises to the top. Not a lot, only one that I'll get to here in a second. But give a shout out to Jalen Royals from Utah State. Jack Beck from TCU, Jaden Higgins from Iowa State, all similar-ish molds of wide receivers. These guys aren't big vertical threats. They're not elite athletes. They are smooth possession wide receivers who can make plays at the catch point, who are reliable. And I've liked what I've seen from all of them, just like very high-level route runners, all guys who use their physicality, use their size to their advantage, because I believe all three of those guys are 210 plus right now. So definitely trend towards that type of wide receiver. Jalen Royal is a little bit shorter than the other two.
I was about to say, quick question. Who do you like better, Noel or Higgins from Iowa State?
Higgins, man.
Thank you. All right, so we're on the same page. I just think his frame and as smooth as an athlete as he is, I think that surprised a lot of people in Mobile. But I was like, unless you've been not watching the tape, it hasn't surprised me.
Yes.
I love Noel too, but I think Higgins is a little bit better.
Yeah, I think at this point, Higgins will probably be the top wide receiver on my board from this event. Yeah, I think he will probably raise into the top 50 after this because he's been so impressive for a guy who's, he's 6'3", 217, has almost 6'8" wingspan. Like, he is a big bodied. That works when you can move the way he does. When you're as, you worry about with bigger wide receivers being stiffer, right? Because usually it's a guy who's 6'3", 217 with that wingspan. It's like, why isn't that? Those guys play basketball when they're correct, right? They're good at on a college hoops court or in the NBA. So to see that guy on an NFL field or on Senior Bowl field, he's been very impressive.
To your point, in team period, they had him run a pivot, and usually don't have guys that are 6'3", 217 pounds, be able to drop their hips and come out of the break like he did. He did it with ease, without a problem. And once I saw that, I said, yeah, everything that I saw on tape is confirmed here in Mobile. And like you, I have him as probably the top receiver at the Senior Bowl, and for sure he should be a top 50 pick.
All right, who's your next or last one here? Last stock up for you.
Yeah. So I'll just like you, I'll name a few guys, and I'll jump into one specifically. Elijah Arroyo has really impressed me at the Senior Bowl. Jackson Dart, there was a big question with him and all these quarterbacks being able to take the snap from under center. I thought as the second day progressed, he got significantly better, and also knowing where to go with the ball and not putting it in harm's way. He's a guy that I think as the process goes on is going to shoot up draft boards. Now, will that get him in the back of the first? Maybe not, but I think second round is going to be where a lot of teams are comfortable taking him as a project. Brashard Smith, man, I love this kid. Ex-receiver, turned running back. To me, he looked like he was the most fluid running back at the Senior Bowl. In the zone scheme, Mike, he is going to kill. And then when you talk about a guy on third down that can run receiver routes and be a mismatch from hell for linebackers and safety, that is what Smith brings to the table. So I've been really impressed with him. And again, this is a deep running back class, but I thought he was really impressive down there in Mobile and this week. And this guy right here, I know we talked about Mike Green. He was in the same practice. I get mixed up on who's an American and who's on national, but he was on the same side with Mike Green and Donovan Azuruku. Femi Oladejo, this dude has really gained some traction at the Senior Bowl. These hybrid guys are starting to find a niche in the NFL. When you talk about the Frankie Louvus, the Micah Parsons, Abdul Carters, right? Guys that played interior linebacker, but they can move to the edge and rush. And for Oladejo, this is his first year playing on the edge, right? Mm-hmm. And his upside is out of this world. I'm talking about Mike. He was giving the business to Josh Cornley. And then the thing that impressed me, out of all the edge guys, he was the only guy that rushed inside. He rushed inside in the 2-point stats because he knows what the NFL is going to, with guys like Micah Parsons and Abdul Carter being able to rush inside. Frankie Louvu is a blitzer as well. And he was making mincemeat of guards too inside. And then they had him guarding running backs in one-on-one drills. So you talk about this guy was probably the most versatile guy at Senior Bowl, and he was doing it all and all at a high level. Went back and watched a little bit more of his tape versus Penn State. Goodness gracious. This dude is gonna move up to probably high day two in my regards after watching what he did at the Senior Bowl.
Yeah, he's one of those where the very first day, kind of what I talked about off the top, where you're just looking at builds and looking at how guys are put together, and you see this guy at 6'2", 261, and you're like, good Lord, that's what it's supposed to look like. I mean, he is just low body fat, long arms. I mean, exactly what you want. 6'8" wingspan. The guy's got at 6'2". That's that is an NFL football player. So yeah, I've been very impressed. And like you mentioned, has done so many different things. They have him rushing on the interior, rushing on the edge. I saw him cover a running back 40 yards down the football field and the running back linebacker one-on-ones. It's like, whoo, that gets you excited. So yeah, I hadn't watched his tape. I hadn't dove into his tape fully before the Senior Bowl, but yeah, I am excited to and even go back to see what he looked like.
I would say watch that Penn State tape.
Okay. We'll do. I'll start with that one. My last one, because I said no cornerbacks look good. One did.
Yeah.
And maybe more than one, but Quincy Riley out of Louisville, second straight year. I mean, it's no surprise that Louisville went toe-to-toe with Florida State, beat Notre Dame a year ago when they had Quincy Riley and Jarvis Brownlee last year at corner. What a duo that was. Quincy Riley, his tape this year wasn't as good as it was last year. In my opinion, I had a little higher opinion on him heading into the season, but that guy is built to play man coverage. He's a little bit undersized, but he is so fluid, so athletic. And the thing I love to see about corners at the Senior Bowl is who plays physically without getting grabby, right? Who's able to contact wide receivers, stay on balance, and kind of like go toe to toe with them without being this guy who like is completely grabby, because some guys are completely don't want to touch them at all. They want to be away from wide receivers. Those are the ones you want to stay away from. The ones who need to be holding on for dear life the entire time, you want to stay away from those guys too. You want the guys who are unafraid to put their chests into wide receivers and basically go toe to toe with them. And he has done that all week long. I think by far and away, he's gotten his hands on the most passes of any corner this week. So very impressive tape. Now he's old. He's going to be 24 years old as a rookie, but the guy can play man coverage.
Without a doubt. Like, to me, he's been kind of like this year's Quinyon Mitchell without the interceptions, right? Quinyon was catching everything last year. And you talked about it. Like, that's the thing. That's something about corners, right? That's why they play defensive back. Because Riley could have had like 3 or 4 picks yesterday, but he dropped them all. In regards to being in phase, right? Even in trail position, understanding that I can't look back if I'm in trail, because that's when the receiver can separate from me. Like, he has that man-to-man mindset where he's comfortable being on the island. I remember Coach called him out for the competition period, I think was with Beck, and he had a great rep, right? Leaned him to the sideline, got him out of bounds, turned around, did the X thing, like incomplete pass. At corner, he's been the most impressive corner to me at the Senior Bowl so far.
Yeah. Now, I had some high hopes for some other guys. I mean, Trey Amos, I think, has been good too. If I had to give like a number 2,
he's been good.
I'd probably go him. I had higher hopes for Uzariah Thomas.
From Florida State. Yeah,
he
had
Florida
a couple
State.
rough. I thought he was going to do a lot better because he's another man corner that on tape was really good.
So
he's had some struggles out there. Yeah,
but yeah, the rest of this corner class.
What do you think about the Kentucky kid? I like him a lot.
Maxwell Harrison. Yeah, he's just like a little skinny. But I think he had some nice plays on the ball. And he's definitely a guy who, he got hurt this past year too, so I was surprised he came out. But I thought he's actually done well at the Senior Bowl. Maybe not like stock booming, but I think he's proven that like he's back and healthy. So have you been? I know we had to move on, but have you been able to watch the UCF guys, Mac McWilliams and Brandon Adams? Dude, yeah, McWilliams had some reps. I haven't watched him pre this, but he was one of the corners that caught my eye a couple of times. Yeah, they moved him in the slot, which he didn't play at UCF, and I thought he showed really well there. And Brandon Adams just looks different than everybody there. Like, he's a legit, like, 6'2", 6'3", and he had some good one-on-one reps. I wish he would have finished a little bit better in some team reps, but he'll be an interesting prospect just because his size. He just looks different than everybody else. Yeah, 6'1" and 3/8, 32 1/4 arms. That's how you put together a corner. I expected a little more from Darian Porter, the Iowa State corner, because he is like, he's big too. 33 arms, 6'7" wingspan, had the fastest GPS time of anyone in attendance so far. So for big, fast, that's usually a good starting point for corners. But he's looked like, a guy who only started playing corner a couple of years ago because he was a wide receiver to start off his career. So we'll see how he fares today. All right, we're going to take a quick break after they get to some quick hitters from the Senior Bowl right after this. All right, best position group on offense. What say you, Leger?
I think we're in agreement with this. I don't even think it's close. Tight end. Ferguson, Arroyo, Halls, like these dudes are balling. I know we didn't get to one of your stock downs, but Harold Fenton, I do wish I would have saw a little bit more from him. For some reason, I don't honestly think they use his skill set well too, because like I felt like Arroyo and Ferguson were getting the passes that kind of highlighted their skill set, where they kind of had Phantom playing more H-back. And I think that's because teams want to see, is he willing to block? And I actually saw him be willing to. Now, that's not going to be his greatest strength at all. He's a guy that just knows how to get open. He's not going to kill you athletically, but he just has a feel on how to get open. And once you get the ball in his hands, he just makes plays. And I feel like they didn't do enough for that. And again, you're not supposed to like scheme stuff up for any specific player, right? But they put guys in certain positions. They want to see how they react. I think for him this week, I think everybody knows he can get open. They wanted to see, how can we use him on offense? Can he be an H-back, right? Can he be in the backfield and lead block and stuff like that? And that's what they kind of had him doing a lot this week. I don't think they really showed his skill set the best in Mobile.
Yeah, 100% agree. Tight end is the best position down here on offense, just in terms of like year on year. O-line, solid class, but like these tight ends, I think a lot of these guys will end up top 100. Fannin, though, I mean, so if you don't know who this is, Bowling Green tight end. He's only 20 years old. He's a junior coming out. He had 1,555 yards last year. Let me repeat, 1,500 yards at tight end. I can't remember a tight end ever having that many. He had 17 catches for 213 yards in his final game in his career against Arkansas State in their bowl game. 117 catches this year. I mean, he was Bowling Green's offense, but he's 6'3", 238. I mean, he's tight end kind of in name only. There are wide receivers bigger than him at the NFL level right now, right? So he's going to have an uphill climb to a role at the next level, and probably going to be forced into, like you said, an H-back-ish role. He's just not going to be your starting inline tight end. But even with all that, he's a little stiff, man. Some of the routes, he can run a corner exceptionally well. He can run a post exceptionally well. He can run an over exceptionally well. And he plays through contact at that size very, very well. And obviously, like with the ball in his hands, 34 broken tackles this past season. The guy's dynamic. But running like a stick nod or like a whip or like a choice, it's just not what you want. So it's just a lot of these guys down here are better than him in that regard. So I do agree that this has kind of been a rough go of it for him, and probably it's just going to be off a lot of boards, right? A lot of people are just going to be like, this isn't for my offense. Why do I want to shoehorn a role in for a second tight end? I just think a lot of people will kind of look at him and be like, I don't know exactly what to do with them, but someone can probably take advantage of that skill set. The other guys down here, though, you mentioned Arroyo. I think Ferguson, Terrence Ferguson from Oregon has been fantastic. I think Nathan Taylor from LSU could very well be the highest drafted of these guys, because he's
really. You think he's going to be in front of Arroyo?
Well, I just think he's the most complete of those three. Like from an inline blocking perspective, the other two are kind of like receivers that have started to trend towards being tight ends. But Mason Taylor's been more of a tight end from day one. So we'll see, because NFL teams still do value the inline part of it. But Arroyo's been, if I had to pick one who's been the most impressive this week, it's been Elijah Arroyo. Yeah. That guy can move.
The way he gets in and out of breaks, it's literally like a receiver. It's kind of like Evan Ingram when he was coming out of Ole Miss, right? So it'd be interesting to see what his role is. And the thing is, he's not a small dude. So like, he'll be able to get in the way of people. I'm not saying he's going to be a killer, right? Because even Mason Taylor's not a killer, right? But he's willing to do it, right? So that's what it comes down to. Like, are you going to be willing to do it? Or does he just find the Evan Ingram role? And, there's been guys that have done that. I don't know why I'm having a brain fart. My guy in San Diego for the Chargers, Antonio Gates, he wasn't a killer blocking, right? Like he essentially just knows how to get open. And I think Arroyo is even athletically better than him when he was coming out. So like there'll be a niche for him. I would not be surprised he goes at the top of the second though, because he's really impressed down here in Mobile.
All right, what's the best position group on defense?
Yeah, this one we're in agreement with. I don't even think it's close, and it's literally, even if you took out Mike Green, Oladejo, and Ezra Rocco from the first group, it would still be this position group, and it's the defensive line just because of what's on the second group. There's literally probably 6 top 50 guys in that second group alone. When you talk about the defensive line, right? Shamar Stewart, from what I've heard, is done enough. He's going to leave Mobile. He was dominant. He was dominant yesterday. Watching Nolan is a guy that I don't mean you talked about. I was surprised that he actually showed up, because there was late buzz of him being maybe even a top 10 pick. Now, again, I think he'll go in the 15 to 20 range. We talk about an explosive D tackle that can get into the backfield and create havoc. He did that a lot on the first day. I felt like yesterday wasn't as good for him compared to the first day. But he's a guy that probably after Mason Graham is going to go not too far after in regards to the draft. Jared Ivey, I thought had a really good day. I was interested to see him because you talk about
I love Jared Ivey, dude.
What it's supposed to look like, right? The long arms, right? The long frame. Like that's what Jared Ivey is essentially. And then I think Princely got banged up a little bit yesterday, but I know there's a lot of buzz on him because he can bend really well as well. And then you got Kyle Kennard in that group as well, like TJ Sanders. Like that group is deep in the second group. And we didn't even talk about Walker or Cam Jackson, the interior guys at defensive tackle. So the D-line group is the best group here overall. It's not even close.
Yeah, I think there's at least a half dozen top 50 guys along this defensive line.
That's what I'm saying. I was like, just in the second group, there might be 6 top 50 guys.
Yeah. So it's easily the best. I'm trying to think of some names we haven't touched on yet that I've been impressed by. I mean, I like a couple of the stout interior DTs, the Aeneas Peebles from Virginia Tech. In the team periods, that guy has been living in the backfield. He's he's 6 foot tall, 289. He is a pure penetrator. I mean, that's a guy that think of, gosh, why am I blanking on his name? The Rams and how they used their second round DT. Yeah, like a Kobe Turner. There you go. I mean, like him, Kobe Turner, and what's his face are very similar that they just drafted in the second round.
Oh, Fisk, Braden Fisk.
Yeah, Fisk. So a scheme like that, if he goes and just can create havoc, the guy is capable of doing that. Omar Norman Lott from
that was another guy I was about to bring up. Yeah.
Very much in a similar mold. But, dude, I do love Jared Ivey. I think he might have the best hands of anyone down at the Senior Bowl. It's just like he's so quick with them, replacing them. You just see him getting that two-hand swipe. He hits it more often than not. So I love his tape. I had him as top 50 player coming in, and I don't think I'll be changing that after this week. All right. Yeah. Someone switching position. Oh, what do you?
I was going to say he'll probably sneak into the back of the first just because of how big he is and the way he is.
Oh, he's like a perfect Chiefs defensive lineman. I feel like that guy feels like a Steve Spagnuolo D end who can kick inside. Like he's loves those guys. So that's the team that I've kind of been mocking him to over the past few months. All right, someone switching positions to keep track of here.
Well, I was going to say Femi Oladejo because he played mostly interior backer, but he played on the edge this year.
I like that call.
We talked about him earlier. We talked about him earlier in the way he's been able to do almost everything at the Senior Bowl, right? Rush on the outside, rush on the inside, cover linebackers in space. So he'll be a guy that, and again, as this process goes on and he continues to put out the tape like this, the Senior Bowl, we'll see what today brings. I would not be surprised if, because of his skill set, teams at the back of the first, early second, look at him and say, this is a guy that has a unique skill set that we'll be able to use, in multiple ways. Now it's going to take a defensive coordinator like Dan Quinn to not just pigeonhole him to one position because he is that good. He is that gifted athletically, but he's a guy that's going to be able to move around for your defense. So I put him there, even though essentially this year he did play on the edge.
Yeah, I do think those type of guys, and like a Jalen Walker from Georgia, people are going to covet them even more in the coming years. Like they will be highly sought after because everyone wants, their own version of that. Because it just makes you so much more multiple as a defense to have a guy like that. All right, mine, Gray Zabel, NDSU, left tackle, playing on the interior. Just if it's center, guard, doesn't matter. I think he's a starter day one for you. All right, storyline to keep a tab on. What do you got?
I actually want you to go first.
I'll go first. Mine, I love. It's the beef that has continued and is only fomenting more between Eric Galko, the Shrine Bowl director, and Jim Nagy, the Senior Bowl director.
Oh my
These guys, and it's not fake, they hate each other. These guys hate each other. I don't think I'm breaking any ground to say it, but I had this amazing tweet exchange that caught some traction. Jim Nagy tweeted out on Monday, for NFL Draft Media traveling from Dallas to Mobile, it's time to recalibrate your eyes.
It's crazy.
Meaning like, hey, the guys at the Shrine Bowl stink, basically. He deleted it, but not before Eric Galko, Shrine Bowl director, got a screenshot of it and said, no need to put players down like this, Jim. Best of luck to the players at the Senior Bowl this week. Incredible stuff. Arif Hassan, wideleftfootball.com, wrote an article breaking down kind of this beef, or breaking down the Senior Bowl, Shrine Bowl. He wrote one a few years ago about the beef specifically, but it's only getting it's only
getting spicier. I love
and
it.
And I love it. I'm kind
Spicy.
of caught in between because I like them both. I obviously like have no issues with either, and I love both events. But they definitely, when you talk to them, they want you to pick a side, and so I'm saying,
pick a side and stay there.
It's great.
I'll get into my storyline. It's kind of a guy we talked about earlier, Jalen Milroe, and just his progression throughout this draft process. Again, there's a rumor that supposedly he is going to work with Jordan Palmer because we talked about this, Mike. A guy that predominantly takes snaps and shotgun. We knew he was going to have some struggle with some quarterback center exchange. His footwork at times is all over the place. And for him, the biggest thing is, can he give us the singles and the doubles, right? The short passes, the intermediate passes. How does he work on getting that accuracy down, right? We've seen projects like Josh Allen have struggles with that. We saw just the other 2 years ago with the Colts and why am I having a brain fart on the kid's name? Anthony
Richardson.
Richardson, yeah. He had struggles with that, right? The ooh and all plays are there for him when it comes to his mobility and throwing down the field. But we know in the NFL, the singles and doubles win you games, right? You got to be consistent when it comes to that accuracy with the intermediate and short passes. And he has really struggled with that throughout the Senior Bowl and his footwork as well. So he's a guy that's going to be a project, right? He's a guy that you cannot expect to play in year one, maybe not even year two, to be honest with you. He's going to need some time to really develop and hone in on his skill set when it comes to accuracy issues. Now, guys have been able to fix it and some guys haven't. So only, time will tell. That's why I think this is a good storyline because it's something we'll be able to watch in the future to see how it develops.
And in his defense, at the Senior Bowl, they're not running read options. His biggest weapon, why people are going to bat for him so hard, is neutered here. You don't get the threat of the run. So he's not facing the same defenses he'll face when he's actually playing football. Because the guy is in terms of just athletes at the quarterback position, where would you stack him in the realms of Lamar Jackson, Jaden Daniels, Anthony Richardson, that we've seen in recent years? Because he's right up there with those guys. I'm not sure he has a natural feel. Like people are saying, oh, could he play running back? I don't think he has like the natural feel like that.
He's not a running back.
But in space, you just like, good luck. You're linebacker. You ain't touching him.
But it's not even that you're not even touching him. And if you're a safety, are you going to be able to tackle him? Because he's put together.
Big.
Like he's a big dude. So like when you talk about kind of comparing him to Anthony Richardson, now Anthony Richardson is an alien. He's not as big as him, but he's bigger than Lamar and Jaden. But he's not as twitched up as Lamar, but he's right underneath him, right? When you talk about being an explosive runner, but then he turns into a running back in the open field and he's hard to bring down if you're a safety or a corner. So again, we know that's there. We know the deep, downfield passing is there on the post and the go routes, but it's his accuracy on the underneath and intermediate throws that he has to work on.
Yeah. All right. Under the radar favorites. Who is a guy that's, and I see yours, and he's truly under.
I can't wait to hear what you say about this one.
He's under everybody.
Yeah.
The guy. So who you got?
Yeah, man. So this guy, I think, measured in at 5'10", 270 pounds, and was a late add, I think, to the Senior Bowl roster. Willie Lampkin. And he had some struggles on day one. Cam Jackson got him with a nice club over. I put that out on X. But since that rep, the man's been holding it down. And this is the reason why he was graded so highly this year. And this is why, if I'm not mistaken, he was an All-American too. Because he's one of the best run-blocking centers in all the draft. Right? Obviously, he's got natural leverage because he's going to be smaller than everybody. But at 270, he's been holding up. I mean, I saw it yesterday. TJ Sanders tried to bull rush him. He knocked him to the ground. He's actually held up since that one rep versus Cam Jackson and held his own. Now, again, he's not going to be most teams' cup of tea because of the measurables. But you talk about a guy that will fight you tooth and nail and get after you. Willie Lampkin, man. I was surprised that, again, when you watch the tape, it looks good, but he's undersized. He's like 5'10", 270 pounds. But going against some of these behemoths, when you talk about Deion Walker, you talk about Cam Jackson, like how is he going to be able to stand up? He's standing up and he's held his own out here at the Senior Bowl.
Dude, that rep he talked about against TJ Sanders. If you haven't seen it, it's on my Twitter. I retweeted it from Brandon Thorne. It was the coldest rep I've seen of anyone out here. He throws him to the ground. He traps him, throws him to the ground, and then immediately steps over him and looks down like,
step over was. I was like, yo, I like this dude. I like this. He's got the mental, like kind of we were talking about Walker, like where's his like mental capacity, like what's his mindset? Like Lampkin's got the mindset. He wasn't gifted by God to have the measurables. It's essentially what it comes down to.
But he is, so he's short, right? 5'10", and the bigger thing to me is 270. 270 is tiny, for a center in the NFL.
Yeah.
That's where he has to play. But even at North Carolina, he played guard, so the center is going to be semi-new to him. But he's going to have to go to basically one of the few teams that's just like pure outside zone, right? You're not.
I'll say it's all zone.
Yeah, he basically has to go to that. There are a handful around the NFL. That's where he's going to go to one of them. But he has long arms, 32-inch arms. I mean, it's not like he's like completely stout. He has the wingspan of an NFL offensive lineman, which again is to me usually more important than pure height, is how long your reach is. Obviously, though, 270 is the difficult number. It's just that's going to be tough to absorb bull rushes. But Aaron Brewer is your best case scenario, or like the guy.
I want to say Kelsey was what 280 when he came out, right?
Kellen was. He ended up getting bigger by the time he was like really doing it in the NFL. He was, closing in on like 290s. But so he's probably gonna have to put on 5 to 10.
I would say 10, 15.
Yeah. Ideally, 20. But I think he can do it, man. He gets after it. His hands are so good. He fights like heck. It's a guy I'm rooting for sure.
Yeah, for sure.
My guy is in a similar mold, honestly. David Walker, Central Arkansas defensive end.
Mm-hmm.
He is 6 foot, 263, which that's like Aaron Donald, what he was playing at on the interior for Los Angeles Rams. And you watch his tape at Central Arkansas, and it's just like, oh my God, it's not even fair. So it's probably the most dominant FCS tape I've ever seen. He's just toying with guys. Looks like a man amongst boys. And here, kind of hot and cold. Like when he tries moves, when he tries to like rip to the edge, when he tries to like do stuff, it hasn't worked. But when he just says, I'm 6 foot, 263, and with a pretty darn good get off, I'm just going to bull rush shit out of you,
bro.
No one can even come close. He has had bull rushes where just guys are just running backwards.
Yeah.
I mean, you talk to offensive tackles consistently, they'll say the guy they least want to go up against is the tiny or the squat guy with no strike zone to hit him, who can just get underneath their pads every single time. So I'm a fan of his, man. I think that combination has worked. Now he's not going to be for everybody, and I think he's going to struggle to like, hold the edge consistently and separate off blocks and make plays. That's just not going to be necessarily his game. But as a pure third down guy, I think he's going to be good. I just don't see how he's not. He's already like very put together and very good as a bull rusher. So he's my guy that like I'll go to bat for, that he's going to make it in the NFL.
Yeah, really impressed with his speed to power. I was wondering if that would translate from the FCS to Mobile. And like you said, it did. And again, we have natural leverage when you're 6 feet tall. And he just, again, he doesn't look like all the other DNs. He's a little more shorter, squattier, right? But he was able to literally get up under everybody's pass and just walk them back. And I was like, we can teach him how to use his hands. That's natural. You can't teach that. Like the lower body strength to be able to get up under somebody and walk them back. Like you either have that or you don't have it, right? And he has it. So like if he gets with a good coach to really redefine his hands, that way he has a counter off that speed to power, you have something cooking. I think that's why a lot of people have him as a top 50 player, because they're like, well, he was at the FCS level, probably didn't get the coaching that he necessarily needed when it comes to his hand usage and everything. But some of the things that we can't teach is his natural leverage and then his strength off of that leverage with the twitchiness to get off and get up under guys and walk them back to the quarterback.
I'm living in fear of him becoming a Philadelphia Eagle. I'm just going to say it. And making them have him being
because Hunt, I didn't
Brandon
like
Graham
that
replacement.
Hunt pick, but it's worked really well for them. Jalen Hunt's starting to really come on the last couple of weeks.
Because Brandon Graham's like the guy in that mold that gives you
that's a perfect comp.
He's 6'1", like same body type, and just lived as a bull rusher his entire career. Did it till he was 35. I think Walker, not to say he's going to be as good as Brandon Graham, but like that's the kind of player you're getting in David Walker. All right. That's our Senior Bowl recap for the first 2 days. We'll be talking a little bit more as the Senior Bowl wraps up over the weekend. And we'll be back next week at the Super Bowl. Are you going to the Super Bowl this year?
Yeah, I'll be there.
Hell yeah. All right. We'll have a bunch of shows Super Bowl week. We'll get to that. We got a bunch of big names joining, a bunch of people hawking God knows what. Very excited to see it. Until then, keep pushing.